What is MRKH syndrome? MRKH syndrome is a rare birth defect in which a girl is born without a uterus on the upper part of the vagina. It's also known as mammalian agenesis, and it affects as little as 1 in every 5,000 girls. It was named for the 3 scientists who discovered it: Meyer, Rothkowski, Custer, and Hauser. Because it is such a rare disease, many doctors don't even know it exists. Many haven't even heard of it before. You have to be legitimately trained in rare diseases, rare birth defects, and or different fertility problems in order to actually know what it is. And the people outside of that group are people who actually have it. Because it is such a rare and uncommonly known disease, it is very hard to diagnose. And a girl can go almost her whole life without being diagnosed. The earliest age is 15 and the latest is 40. It all depends when you realize something's wrong. There's studies of one woman being 39 and just being diagnosed because she and her husband wanted to have a child. Because with MRKH syndrome, you don't have a uterus, it is impossible to conceive. But in many cases, because a girl still has ovary glands, it is not at all impossible to have a child through surrogacy. It's a very physical thing, but it isn't. Physically, you know something is wrong, but it's really much more of the emotional side effects that girls with MRKH have to deal with. Girls with MRKH typically suffer from depression, anxiety, and such. They tend to have severe mental trauma because it's a wake-up call. You know? Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. And that's really the only words that I can express to really tell you what goes on in your mind. You question God a bit because, as you do with anything, it's dramatic, it's hard. It's hard. There are some girls who were reported to have this, and they unfortunately took their lives because it was too much for them to handle. One person of historical knowledge actually attempted suicide a total of 4 times. The 4th taking her life, although it had nothing to do with her condition. This person was Eva Braun. She was a German actress in World War II and actually caught the eye of an infamous German dictator. Yeah, I honor Eva very much. Not for political reasons or anything such as that, but just because she was a girl who had this syndrome that is hard to comprehend. I can relate to what she was feeling. I can feel so, she's just such an inspiration for me. And she attempted suicide a total of 3 times in her life before the 4th time, which had nothing to do with MRKH syndrome. That tells you just how dramatic this is. Okay? It really does. Another person, I could go on for hours about different things, different people who had MRKH syndrome. But I've only mentioned 2 more. The first is Queen Amalea of Greece. And she was about a little bit before LeBron. She was married to the King of Greece, and she had MRKH syndrome. And her inability to produce an heir was the reason why her husband was taken from power, pretty much. Can you imagine that? Being a queen, being required to have an heir, and you can't. And because it was at such a time before surrogacy, you can't just do that. It's mind-boggling. I'll tell you the 3rd person at the end of this video. But just keeping those in mind, those 2 people. There are treatments for MRKH syndrome because the upper part of the vagina is typically missing. Intercourse and sexual activities are actually kind of impossible or extremely painful. There are some procedures that make it more comfortable. The most common in the U.S. is called the McIndoe procedure, in which they literally fabricate a vagina. There's another one in Europe, very similar, only the opening is more awkward. Both methods of these require regular pressure to be regular pressure in the area in order to keep it open. But if this vagina closes, you can't open it again. It will never open again, and you have to get another procedure to have it taken out. There is another very experimental procedure being done by a doctor in Georgia, in which is more permanent and doesn't require regular pressure. It doesn't require regular pressure applied. Very experimental. Only a handful of girls have actually gone through this one. And because this is so rare, we won't really have an answer for a while. Because uterus transplants are still in their infancy, there has only been one recorded instance of this, of an MRKH patient having such a procedure. She had it about 2 years ago, and I haven't heard anything since. And she was given her mother's uterus. Her mother transplanted her uterus to her daughter so she could have a child. I have no idea if this was a successful transplant, but it paves the way for MRKH girls to actually have their own child. I'm looking at the camera. Yes. Biggest issue. And it'd be an interesting thing, and yet you have to ask, how many women would do this for another person? Well, we could argue people who never want kids. Okay. Okay. What if they change their mind? in all fairness, what if a person who has a kid changes their mind? Yes, so everything has different things. I mean, I'm getting off the subject. MRKH syndrome is hard to comprehend, and it's hard to understand, and it's hard to talk about. And yet I really like to try and talk about it because I really want people to know what this is. I don't want to be just another statistic. I don't want that. I want people to know what this is. I told you that I would tell you the third person who has MRKH syndrome. But I think by now you can kind of guess, just by this speech, who the third person is. Because you've been watching them for a good portion of the speech. You've been looking right at her face. And I have to ask you, did you see that coming?
Thank you. Goodbye.